Okay, thank you for your time today. Today we just wanted to talk about college preparation process. My name is Hani, and Ines and I will do kind of an overview of it. This talk, I think we did this last I checked, I think it was December of 2019. So 2.5 years ago, right before COVID. This is going to be an overview of the academics and the financials. So I know there's a spectrum here of people, right? From some are juniors, seniors in high school, right? You're maybe closer to the end and you know a lot of these things. Some of you maybe earlier on the process. Some of the parents, this is maybe your first child going through the process. This is maybe your third child going through the process, right? So all different. So we're going to try to make it informational. Some of it, again, is going to be stating the obvious. You should know, especially if you're a junior, a lot of these things. Some of the things, as a freshman, you may not know. Or you may not know it as well. And also we'll talk about the financials at the end, which is kind of, it used to be when I was growing up, I let my parents deal with the financials. Nowadays, everybody can deal with the financials. Does that make sense? And we'll try to make it interactive. Again, hopefully it won't take more than an hour of your time. And make it just more fun. Make sense? Anything, I guess, from a parent's perspective, anything that you want to ensure that we cover? I'm not saying we will or won't, but we'll try to do our best. Any topic specifically that the parents feel that we should be covering or want to cover? You tell me at the end. That's a fair answer. I was going to say you can wait till the end. Yes, that's fine. Anything? Go ahead. No. You can tell me now if you have an idea. The career. That's a whole topic to itself. So we'll talk about a little bit about that. So just so you know, we did this also a couple of years ago. This is very the college planning process and the execution part of it. We're going to try to do sometime maybe June or maybe September. We'll see how this plays out. We'll do what we did a career day. So I think we did this maybe 4 years ago. Well, we're bringing speakers, again, similar to this format. We're getting different people from different areas, and they'll talk about their career, right? Pharmacy, education, medicine, PA, whatever, right? I think last time we had lawyers, we had dentists, right? Whatever it is. So we'll do that topic, but that's a whole topic to itself. But we can, again, there's some directional, right? So we'll talk about it a little bit here, but it's more directional, right? If somebody's a sciencey person, they're probably not looking at law, for example, right? If somebody's an English writing person, they're probably not looking at, medicine, right, or healthcare, right? So there's probably categories, and that's probably the easy way to think about it, at least at this age, is am I a math sciencey person? Am I a writing, reading person? Am I an artistic person, right? Which category? That's the first step, right? If we don't know what that category is, that's the first thing we figure out. If we know the category, then we can sit there and say, of the medicine sciences, engineering, prone, computer science, prone, dentist, prone, right? Then that's a different conversation. Make sense? So we won't address it today, maybe at a future time, but that's maybe the 5-second answer to the question. Okay? So why don't we start? Sorry, I couldn't get the mouse to work, so we'll try this manually. So again, the college prep process here in general, right, is for everybody, right? So it used to be where colleges and universities were a special thing for certain people. Colleges have become much more affordable, and in a lot of ways, college and universities, I'm going to put college as an umbrella, right? For universities, colleges, community colleges, all those are colleges in some ways. And the thought process here is we have to start planning. So if you think of this from perspective, is when you're going through the high school phase, right, there's different paths to take, right? We can go from straight into college, right, or university. We can go and spend a couple of years at a community college for reasons we can talk about in a sec. And then from college, we can go to grad school. We can go to professional school. So professional schools are the law, maybe the engineering, medicine, dentistry, vet. Take your favorite topic, right? And all paths somewhat lead to a job, right? There is a path, which is, I graduated from high school, I haven't figured out what I want to do with my life, I'm going to get a job as something, and then I'll figure out college later on in life, right? That's a path I didn't put, but that is in the path, I guess, that some people also do. I do a year of service. I go do a year of whatever, right? So there's a different path that's not slated. That's probably the exception to the rule of most people, maybe not necessarily the rule. So again, if somebody's going to take a year off and do something, go to Egypt, go to do service, do missionary, whatever, go to the monastery, maybe they delay this process for a year or two, and maybe they end up doing that permanently, but then if that's the case, then this whole topic is frankly is irrelevant to them, right? Make sense? Okay. So how do we, phone. Okay, how do we start? So the first thing is, again, you have to pray, right? Why do we start with prayer, right? Because sometimes we don't know what we're up against. The whole college process, again, for folks who haven't done this before with a child before, in the U.S., right? If you've grown up in Egypt and you're coming here as the first child you go through, for example, this may be something that you've never gone through. So you want to understand that God will allow you to help you understand this process. But two, every child is different, right? I have two little girls, relatively, right? They're different. And if for parents, they have the same two parents, the same environment, the same everything, and just diametrically different, right? So in some ways, the answer to every student or every person or every youth is different, right? No one answer works out well for everybody. So we want to make sure that we are praying and we're thinking about what is the best for that individual, what is the best for the family dynamics, and whatever requirements or restrictions the family may have, right? The answer for a family that has one child may be different than a family that has 4 kids, right? Again, make sure that they understand all the high school requirements. Every school district has different requirements, different expectations. Again, study, do your best. Academic counselors, I assume every student is assigned an academic counselor, right, in the high school. It doesn't necessarily mean that every academic counselor is as good as the others, right? Some are known in some schools that this academic counselor is better than this. It is what it is. But again, at least be assigned to one. And if you feel that you're not getting the information, maybe ask for another one, or sometimes some schools do it by alphabetical, so you don't have much of a choice. But again, look at other alternatives. Look at the college requirements, right? So as a freshman, don't wait till your junior year. As a freshman, look at what exactly these colleges are expecting, right? So sometimes the high schools say you need to do 3 years of this, 2 years of that, 4 years of that. That's wonderful. Some schools will say, I need A, B, and C, right? And so you have to ensure about that. If you want to go into, a science, you need to ensure that's a different answer than if you're going to liberal arts. If you're going to become a lawyer, you may not need to care about AP calculus or physics. If you're going to engineering, you better make sure you have all that stuff, right? So you have to start the point I made earlier about categories of where your career, where it wants to be, categories. You have to have some sense of a category, right? Look at your interests, etc., right? Again, we talk about having a career fair that'll help, whatnot. The other thing, just to be aware of, read a lot, and I don't mean it in a read a novel, but read a lot about these universities and these experiences, right? Part of the college planning process, honestly, is understanding where is it that makes sense for a fit, right? Fit is spiritual fit is emotional fit is physical, how close or far you are from home, right? Fit in friends. So as you think of these universities or these environments, right, there's an answer of, I want to go to this school, but this school is in the remote area that has no church near it. Or this is an area that has a church, but it's 10 hours away from home. Am I going to get homesick or not? Or the parents may get wanting to see you, and so they're not maybe willing to let you go far, right? So all these things, think about all these different variables and start reading and looking at what all these things, these options look like. Okay? And the big thing here is time management. As you go through the 4 years, right, or the 3 years, the application process is critical. Understanding and pacing yourself. So some of these things, the next couple of slides are relatively dry, but for most people, it probably should be relatively straightforward, right? your test score, your SATs or whatever it is not the only thing that matters, right? So when I was going through college many years ago, the SAT was like one of the major things, right? Now with COVID, right, the SAT concept kind of became optional, right? That's going to be undone soon, in my opinion. But the test scores are important, but they're not the only thing. But they are critical. So academics and your grades in school matter, right? They're not the only thing, but they matter. The essays matter. Why does the essay matter? Because that gives you an opportunity to talk about yourself, right? When I was applying, saying I came from a third world nation in Egypt, or my parents immigrated or whatever, that was common. Now every other person says that, right? All the Indians, the Bangladeshis, the Mexicans, like everybody does it. That if you write an essay about a cultural thing, it's like join the club. There's another 5,000 of you who say the same thing, right? So as you think about the essay, really think about what is special about you. What is the one thing that you would want them to walk away from and remember you've got? It has to be something key, right? And so even though, and some of you may know this, I have an almost 12-year-old and an almost 9-year-old. And I sit there and I say, if they were writing their essay today, what would be the first sentence in that essay that's going to make them pop? So as you think about this, as you write your essay, you get to that point, what is going to make that person read, right? If you're a guidance counselor or you're an admissions counselor, and after a while, all these essays look the same. I've always aspired to become a doctor, and I've done volunteer work. After a while, they look the same. Right? So you have, in the first, honestly, 5 seconds, you need to grab an attention. That first paragraph is like the attention getter. As a guidance, because I do some interviewing for seniors wanting to go to one of the schools. And like within 5 seconds, I can tell this person's going to make it or not. Just from an interview. When I look at their essays, 5 seconds, they're going to in or out. Because either they're going to tell me something that's going to make me want to read and spend more time with them, or I'm going to say, you're just like all the other people who are applying. And when you have universities, their acceptance rates are 5%, 10%, 2%, there's a lot of, dime a dozen, so to speak, right? That 50, 60% of the applicant pool, they all look the same after all. They're not bad, they're just not special, right? So in some ways, you have to sit there and say, how can I pop? What makes me, especially the more selective schools you go to, right? If you're not going to go to a very hard, competitive school from an application percentage-wise, it may not be as big of a deal. But you still need to pop, right? Because what you're also thinking about is, if I get in, I want financial aid. So I need to show something special about me to get that financial aid. So even if it's a school that I feel like I'm comfortable, I can get into, right? I want to go into Rowan, right? I want to get financial aid at Rowan. What's going to make me pop? Say, I want to get this person into my university, right? So always look at it from their side of the fence and say, what's special about me? Does that make sense? So again, the usual stuff, right? We all know this, right? 4 years of English, 3 to 4 years of math, depending on your area of expertise, sciences, social stuff. These are all pretty much, everybody wants the same thing, right? So there's nothing special here, and your universities and your high schools will tell you. Then you get into this conversation about the APs, right? So most schools will have AP credit. Some schools will actually limit the number of people who are allowed to take the AP classes. Right? So every school district is a little different. Sometimes it's like, we have so many spots, who wants to take it? Some schools are very competitive, high school-wise competitive, that they say, no, you're not good enough to take an AP. You're taking the honors level. Or you're not good in the honors, you're taking the regular, right? APs help you from different ways, right? As you know, right? APs help you because if you do well, it increases your GPA dramatically. But 2, it helps you get credit for college, which somewhat saves you from one class, right? From a price perspective. So if you are excited about a topic, let me just put it that way. APs are not easy. So you have to be wanting to do the extra work and the drive to it. If you don't like English and writing, do not take an AP English. Right? Because it's going to be a miserable experience. Doesn't mean you won't do well. I didn't say that. But you'll be miserably, going through that experience. So pick your battles. But this is a great way to stand out. And again, some of your schools have a lot of really smart people. They take 3, 4, 6 APs, and they get 5s across the board, right? It doesn't mean necessarily they're brilliant. It just means they're hardworking, right? So we have to sit there and figure out is that, again, the goal at the end of the day is how am I going to differentiate myself? I have to be smart enough and with a twist. Pure academics are good, but it has to be academics with something else, right? We'll talk about extracurriculars in a second. Make sense? So APs, right? Again, I'm not saying anything particularly new you guys haven't heard, right? Again, your charade of AP topics and whatnot, there's multiple physics and multiple calculuses, etc. But again, if your position is I want to get into a pre-med program, or I want to do a 6-year, 8-year program in medicine, and you haven't taken AP physics and you haven't taken AP bio, they'll go question you. If you want to go into medicine in a 6-year and 8-year program, right, and you didn't take AP English, they're like, okay, it's not the end of the world, right? So you have to also think of it from their perspective. This whole topic of SATs, PSATs, right? Some of you already, through the junior year, some of you in the middle, you probably have taken SATs, PSATs. During COVID, it basically became voluntary, right? It's going to be slowly, in my opinion, be undone. What's happened with the SAT situation is that unless somebody got like a 1550, they did not report, right? So if I got 1550 or 1600 or 1500, whatever your favorite high number is, then I say, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you my number. If I got a 1300 or 1200 as a student, you didn't volunteer. So what happened was you had this bimodal, right? You have really, really smart kids who showed that number, and that's all you could tell. So the university level said, well, everybody who did not submit their SATs, therefore they got a low number, or they weren't really proud of their number, right? So it was didn't really help in some ways. The SATs, the point is somewhat is to differentiate people, at least from one metric. Not having the SATs, again, COVID situation aside, doesn't really help the universities, because now that's one thing that they can't compare people on, right? So there are some universities that are slowly undoing this, right? So I'm not sure if Rutgers, for example, does or whatnot, but I know a couple other universities in the area who said we're going to start requiring the SATs again, because now they're differentiated. So take it seriously, because I think by the time you guys apply, it's not going to be an option. I'm not saying for all schools it's not going to be an option, but a lot of them are going to say we're going to want it again. Okay? So again, you've probably taken the PSATs before already anyway, so it's nothing earth-shattering. Again, there's this whole thing of ACTs and SATs, right? Different topics, different numbers, etc. Most universities now will tell you can take the ACTs or the SATs. It doesn't really matter, right? It used to be where the East Coast and the West Coast, when I was growing up, the East Coast, the coasts wanted SATs, and the Midwest was an ACT. Now I think everybody says take whatever you want, but take something. Okay. So as you're going through your junior year, if you haven't taken SATs, take it seriously. The numbers have gotten, the averages for most of these schools are through the roof, right? So a lot of these schools, like the numbers, if you look at their number for their average, their median, compared to 15, 20 years ago, there's like an SATs, they're on average, they went up 150, 200 points, right? And I've asked universities, I said, why is it that your number is going that much higher? Like, are people that much more brilliant than they were 20 years ago? And they said, there's two reasons. One is the SAT grading rubric got easier. So when I took the SATs, if you answered a question and you got it wrong, you got penalized. So you had to make sure, is it worth taking that guess? Where now, there is no penalty for getting it wrong. So that's one difference. The other difference is there's just so many more people applying. So if between those two things, the numbers have gone up and everything, right? So when I was growing up, getting 1,400 was like you got into Ivy League school. That you're done. Now 1,500 means nothing because of those two reasons. Again, remember what I said. Academics are important, but you need to also differentiate yourself, right? You can go into a Rutgers honors program and go right on a full scholarship, and somehow you have to differentiate yourself. So even from that perspective, you have to think about it. Again, widely accepted, both of them, whatnot. All different tests. Make sure when you take that first test for the SATs, be prepared. When you submit your SATs, in a lot of ways you submit all your grades. They'll pick off the best of each one, that's fine. But they'll see everything. So if you went into the first exam and you took it as a joke, they'll see that joke number. So don't take it unless you're ready. That's comment one. Again, there's different timelines, etc., right? You guys know this better than I do, right? For folks who are juniors, seniors. There's all these test prep programs. And there's all these private tutors who will promise you that if you come to me and you fork out $3,000, I'll get you that $1,500, like what, right? I don't really care which path you take, but take a path that's serious, right? Whether you want to do it by the books and buy 5 books and just keep on practicing. If you want to join in, I'm not sure there's Kaplan anymore and whatever, right? Kaplan's Princeton Review, all these programs, right? Some of your schools have it. If you want to do a private tutor because you just need to focus on English and you don't really do well in English, take it seriously. Because again, all these things matter. There's a reinforcement, right? Especially the more competitive the schools are. There is a conversation to be had is, do I want to be the smartest kid in an average school or the least intelligent person in a really hard school? Understand the difference? Right? If I'm a B+ student, do I go to an average school and be really, really good and build confidence to get to grad school? Or do I go to a really top-notch school and just kind of be like, okay? Like, right? That's a philosophical issue in itself, right? But I'm saying is either way, you have to kind of do the best that you can such that you sit there and say, what choice do I want to make? If you blew your SATs and didn't do well from the beginning, you already have eliminated a lot of options for yourself, right? So just think about some of those things. Yeah, the application process, right? There's the whole process. Every university, there's the general, the common ones, right? And every university has their own programs. Some universities will say, here's my 3 extra essays or 4 extra essays that you have to do. Look at the essays up front, right? You don't have to wait till, the summer right before your senior year. Most of their essays don't really change dramatically. They're very similar. And from looking from one college to the other college, other than the common questions, right? The essays are so similar. And they'll always ask you something generic. Tell me about something that we're missing, like something open-ended. And that's the question you have to sit there and say, that's the question that I need to pop, right? That's the question that I need to answer to say, why me? Right? It's the why me question. Why should you take me as opposed to the other 20 people that are next to me that look the same as me? Right? And so you have to start thinking of what exactly is your story. Right? What is special about you? And maybe your story is, I went to the Intel competition, I got first place in an Intel science competition. That's fine. Maybe your story is, I loved law and I did an internship in the White House. Let me tell you about the experience in the White House. Something that says, that's something I haven't heard from the other 20, 30 or people that look like you. It doesn't really matter, right? Or I've done community service in Camden and I've done something particularly special. Like something that says there's something special about you. Something that I remember at the end. Again, look at it from their perspective. They're reading hundreds, if not thousands of essays. What is going to make them say, oh, remember that one essay about that one person, right? That's what you want to stand out. And it's not just about getting in. Remember, there's the getting in part, and then there's the what? The money part. You're trying to do 2 things at the same time. And so you have to sit there and focus that even if I get in, I really want to make sure that I differentiate myself. Such that they can say, you know what, this person is in need. There's a special program or special scholarship for people who want to do X, Y, and Z. And then we'll give you that scholarship. So in that way, also as part of the application process, look at all the scholarship opportunities within that school. They have sometimes designated certain things for certain people, certain regions, certain ethnicities, whatever it is, such that you can differentiate yourself. Right? And that's something you should also do with the guidance counselor, right? If there's 2, 3 schools that you really want to go to, look at the options for scholarships and those types of things. We'll talk about it later. Such that I say, these are the ones I should be applying for because I can fit in that category. And sometimes they're not huge. Maybe a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there. But it still matters. Okay? Again, we talk about essays. I keep on harping on it, but it's critical, right? Brainstorm the ideas. Write a draft. Get somebody to read it for you. Get some feedback. Guidance counselor, English teacher, somebody you trust. Because that kind of is that whole process. as Egyptians for the most part, I'm not sure if this generation is different. My generation, we're kind of like, almost like, the first group that came into the U.S. Our parents, we couldn't depend on our parents on English as much, right? Maybe this generation is a little better. Some were born here. Maybe being born in the U.S. or came here when much younger, you feel the English is a little more under control. I was in this ambivalence state. I came out as at 10. So it's kind of like a little mix, right? So, but again, make sure you write and you get used to it. Again, essays don't have to be long. But again, key concept. What is it that I want to take out of the way? If I write one thing that I want them to remember, what is that going to be? Right? I had a friend of mine when I were applying, and he was diagnosed with autism. Right? And his essay was, his first line in his essay was something to the effect of, again, I can't remember the exact words, was more like, my parents realized I was special, and autism. Like, if that is the first line in your essay, do you think the person would want to read it? Yeah. If that first line in the essay was, I enjoy many things, or I'm really smart, or I've done community service. Okay. Join the crowd. Right? So again, that first paragraph, so important. Last paragraph, you reinforce the first paragraph. Right? When I read essays, I honestly don't read it. I read the first line in each paragraph. And then I decide whether it's worth reading or not. That's just my style, because I don't have the time. So I sit there and goes, first line, or maybe it's not like the first paragraph and then the first line in each paragraph after that. And then I say, do I want to go back and read? I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying that's how I do it, right? So you have to think of it in that perspective. These people are reading hundreds, if not thousands. And the same thing with an interview. An interview is just a verbal essay. What's so special? Like, I always ask the question, what's so special about you? The question I love to ask. So I interview for MIT. MIT is a very sciencey, engineering, I don't use the word geeky, but that theme. And unfortunately or fortunately, I am not as geeky as a lot of my friends with MIT. So I'll always ask the question. So again, these are seniors, right? Fall seniors. And I say, what did you do last summer? 9 times out of 10, the answer is, well, I wanted to learn Python, or I wanted to learn Java, or I picked up a technology, or I did something, right? I'm like, okay, join the crowd. One of another 100 that all look the same as you. One kid said, I didn't do anything technical. I decided to do this. And I was like, why? And his answer was, because I have other things in life that are important as much as my academics. And I'm not sure if that person got in or not, but it made me wow, there's something special about this person. This person is not just a bookworm. Because the problem with MIT and a lot of other schools, right? You get a lot of bookworms, right? You get a lot of people who took APs, who are really smart, right? After a while, they look the same. Right? If you apply Rutgers and you're trying to get into the honors program, what's special about you? You and everybody else is really smart. What else you got? Right? So think about it from their perspective. What is going to make them say, I remember that person? They're really mellow, or they're really smart, or they're very concise, or they're whatever it is. Something that says, I remember this person because of this thing, right? Again, the whole comes to early application, binding or non-binding, right? That's the decision you can make. But that whole process, you have to figure out is it something you really want to do? You really want to go to that school or not? Right? Binding obviously is binding, right? You apply, you get in, you go. Certain schools, it matters that you apply early because it shows that you're serious. Certain schools, it doesn't matter. So you pick your battles of whether it's worth it or not. The application process. So the application process may be December, right? You're probably, by the time you start high school, senior year in high school, September, you should be more or less done with most of your essays. Through your summer, you should be writing up your essays. You should be ready, right? Again, because there's some generic essays, right? What's so special? Why me, right? I keep on saying the why me essay. There's always a why me essay that you have to answer. What's special about you? These processes, right, are November, even the regular ones are December. But you want to do an initial one such that by the time school kicks in, you're not scrambling in November, December trying to get your essays done. Right? There is a common one that everybody does, that's fine. But some schools will ask you for their own special questions just because they want to be special. Doesn't mean anything, right? But you want to, again, look at some of the questions up front. Look at if you're a junior now and you're going to be applying in September. Look at the application for this year that your friends did or just came through. What essays did they ask? Right? It's not really going to be dramatically, honestly different. Look at the 5-10 schools and look at them. So that brings me to another topic, right? Which is, how do you figure out which colleges to apply? Right? That's the whole topic to itself. But in some ways, right, you have to kind of think about categories, right? There's categories. Here are schools that my guidance counselor and I feel like, they're a pretty good chance. I have above 70% chance to get in. Right? And there's a category here of schools that 95% I should get in. Right? And there's a category up there which is the not too optimistic. 3 categories. Right? Which they call the reaches, the top. Right? The comfortable or the average. And the bottom is the safety. Which is, I should get into this. It shouldn't be a problem. I'm not saying financial is a whole topic to itself. Right? Those are 3 categories. So look at those, call it 10 schools, right? 3, 4, 3. Easily remember. Look at those schools' applications from last year. What did they ask? If you were filling it out now, what would you answer? Because most likely the question's not going to change in 6 months. Okay? You don't want to be scrambling there. There's a whole topic of, again, we talk about this, about even choosing the schools, right? How far? How close? Sometimes high schools want to leave home as far away as possible. If I can get to California, I'd go to California. Right? But sometimes they're like, yeah, when the reality kicks in, I really want to go across the country. And sometimes the reverse, right? The parents don't. The parents want them to go across country. Right? Why? Because sometimes the parents feel like they're ready. This is an emotional maturity conversation that we have, again, between every person, right? Some people just want to leave home because they want to get rid of, they don't want to be near their parents, they want to do whatever they want to do. That's probably the wrong reasons to go. But it happens, right? But again, that's a whole topic to itself. My personal belief is you're within 4 or 5 hours from home, you're far enough, but not far enough. Because that kind of is a little, you're far enough to be able to grow up for the youth, right? You want to grow up. But not far enough that if you need something, or they need to see you, or they want to see you, you can still go there. Right? Does that make sense? So college is a force function for growing up too, right? So I know there's a lot of Coptic parents who have the sense of I want my child to be at home until the day they get married, right? Until they're 20, whatever, or 30, whatever, they'll be home, right? I don't necessarily, me personally, I don't necessarily believe that. Now, again, my 2 girls are young. Who knows? Maybe by the time they hit 18, 19, I may say I change my mind. But I think it forces people or allows people to grow up, depending on their maturity level. And some are Villanova, which is the other side of Philly. That's far enough. It's far, but it's not far. And for some, Florida is fine. I'm independent. I can handle it. I can grow, right? It depends. And not to be sexist, boys are different than girls. And firstborns are different than the babies in the family. Right? So again, the dynamics are very different. Right? So all these things are important, right? But I want you to think of this list here. Distance, ranking of the school, the money component, which is the financial aid, the independence, the health. Is the child, is the person, is the youth, do they have a medical condition that you're going to be worried about if they were far away? Environment. not to be political, but to be political. Liberal school, conservative school, Christian school. Like, know what you're getting yourself into. Right? But also do they have friends there? Right? If I want to go to Rutgers, am I okay to have myself and another 500-600 Copts roaming the campus? Do I like that environment? Some people say, I love hanging out with Copts. And I love hanging out with Egyptians. I would love to see them everywhere I go. And some like, I don't want to see them. I just want to be as far away from them as possible. Right? So if you don't like hanging out with Egyptians, don't go to Rutgers. Because that's what you'll see. I mean, I didn't go to Rutgers, but that's what I hear, right? Right? It's just there. Right? Go to University of Virginia in Charlottesville. There's no Copt and there's no church in the area. Maybe that's not a good idea, but that's a completely different experience, right? So the environment matters. Do I have friends there? Friends from school that maybe non-Copt, or friends are Copt. Maybe that's also people. So maybe, you're not comfortable sending them to Florida, but they're going with a really good friend that you really trust from school, and they're going together to the same school. Okay, maybe that's a little bit, right? We know people in the church who all went to Rutgers, and they'll room together. And you feel like there's an infrastructure of support there. Right? So think about those things, right? And again, the last thing is church. Is there a church nearby? Can I take them there? Is there a support network in that area where the priest or the service there will pick them up and take them? Right? So Boston, for example, DC, right? I'm not sure if Philly, maybe Philly does. But I know Boston and DC, for example, are major college hubs. And there's a lot of infrastructure support services in those two communities, at least that I know of, where people are literally like bussed around to church and back. I'm not sure if Philly does. Does anybody know? They do. Okay. So, I mean, I went to school in Boston, so I know. So that those two are very well done, right? Maybe Florida is the same way. Maybe University of Florida, right? But I'm just saying is like there's certain hubs that you feel like there's an infrastructure support for the kids to get to, because otherwise there's no way how to get from point A to point B to church. Who's going to drive them? Do they need a car? Right? There's a whole bunch of things like that. So think about those things also, right? If they ended up in Carolina, right? Does Carolina have an infrastructure? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So those are things to think about and ask, the local folks. So that's kind of makes sense so far. Did I lose anybody? Any questions? This is kind of the academic-y side of the defense. I'm not sure unless you have anything to say or this.
I just have a couple of points to emphasize.
Go for it. At the end, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of more or less kind of self-explanatory somewhat, but just kind of emphasize the academics part. We'll talk about the financials in a sec. We'll flip to the financial side now. But yes.
So I know you're an interviewer. How does that work? Do you get invited after you apply?
We say that one more time?
So you're an interviewee, right?
Yes.
Interviewer. So for the interviews, how does that work? Do you get invited for an interview after you apply?
Yeah. So what happens is, so you're looking at from your point of view, you're applying, right? So some schools, and I don't think that many, have requirements for interviews. Okay, so that's an easy thing. A lot of the schools will sit there and say, if you want an interview, let us know. Right? As part of the application process. Or you can call up and say, I want to do an interview. Right? It goes through the admissions process and they get assigned to a regional person. So somebody in your region will interview you. And again, the whole point to sign up for an interview is what? To answer what question? Why me? Or why choose me, right? So if you're going to interview just to chit-chat, unless it's required, I wouldn't bother. Because from my perspective, what I do at the end of the day is I'll write up Makeri. His strengths, his weaknesses, is he a good fit? And so what I do is, here's a good fit. Academically, I have no idea what your grades are, so I can't even answer that. Emotionally, conversation, here's 4 criteria. They're not really academic because I don't know what your grades are. And I'm not allowed to ask you about your grades. I'm not allowed to ask you what else you're applying. Right? So it's just personality. And at the end of the day, I say, the question really is, do you think this person emotional maturity level is suited? Question. There's a 1 through 5 number. 5 is like they're walking on water. 1 is they're gone. Right? You usually end up in a lot of 3s. So 3s doesn't help you. If you're, from your perspective, you don't want a 3. You definitely don't want a 1. Like 1, that means you're rejected, right? You're aiming for a 4 or 5. Otherwise, say, this is what, right? And there's some people, I say, I know they're not, I don't know about their academics, but they had enough energy and drive and ideas and thoughts that you feel like this person's going to be, when they get into school or not, you can tell this person's going to be a leader. And then you can tell a lot of them are like, well, I'm just kind of going through the process, and kind of like, they're not dry, but they're just a dime a dozen. So does that answer your question? Long-winded way?
Like after you do the write-up, like do you send that to
Yes. So I send it to the admissions office. And so what happens is after the admissions office, after the announcements come out, I'll get an email saying, here's the 3 or 10 people you interviewed, right? You'll find out what the decision was, but only after they check their email. Right? So when they find out that, they got in or they didn't get in, I'm allowed to see that number. I mean, I can't do anything about it, but, again, I'm always curious to see what is my judgment versus what the admissions, again, the admissions folks have the plethora of things, right? And then you're always cognizant somewhat of regionals, right? North Jersey is very different than South Jersey, right? For the same applicants. North Jersey's population is denser. There's more applicants out of North Jersey than South Jersey. I won't forget you, Ben. Right? So in some ways, their admissions office looks at it and says, here's the number from New Jersey total, but what regions, what schools? And so if you are somebody on the south part of Jersey, you may be not academically as good as a North Jersey person, but you're close. They may say, I'd rather take a South Jersey person because now it's a different region. Right? And that was always the thought of, we'd rather take certain people from certain states because they don't apply. How many people apply to Kentucky, from Kentucky to whatever your favorite school is? Not that many. They're probably going to apply to University of Kentucky because of the basketball court, right? They're not going to apply to Princeton. They're not going to apply to Rutgers. So when they see somebody coming from Kentucky who want to apply to Rutgers honors program, oh, okay, that's special. Like, even if they're not as good as somebody from North Jersey or New York or South Jersey, they say, again, diversity, right? And there's this whole thing, many years ago that I think they're going to undo, which is if you're Asian American, you're a minority. Now I think it's actually the reverse. Now you're the majority, right? There's all these lawsuits at some schools about, if you're almost the majority level, right? Indian and Pakistani and Chinese, they're not a minority anymore. For Rutgers, if you're Egyptian, you're not a minority, right? I mean, right? And oh, by the way, do not put that you're African American, please. If you're Coptic, if you're Egyptian heritage, you are not African American. Okay? You are not. You are white by definition of the U.S. government, because in there it says Middle Eastern. If you're Saharan and South, so I think Ethiopian. I'm not sure if Ethiopian, Eritrean, you can or cannot. You probably could say African American.
You can identify as a person of color, but for application purposes, especially in the state of New Jersey, kids have lost their scholarships. They've been sued, putting being Egyptian or non-definition African American. So anyone sub-Saharan Africa is the only people that qualify.
Yeah. So be careful, because people have gotten in as that, and they'll look at them and say, you're not African American. What are you talking about, right? So you don't want to get yourself into trouble later on, right? I think for Ethiopian and Eritrean, you probably can go. You probably are fair. You can probably say African American. I think you should be okay. For Egyptians, you cannot. Right? Lebanese, the same thing. Jordanian, I don't think there's anybody here in that category. But if you're in those categories, you cannot. Okay? So again, just be careful of application process. Yes?
Is interviewing really that important? Like, if you get called for an interview, should you do it?
So I've at times sent emails to people say, I want to interview, and I don't hear from them. I don't really care. Again, what's the whole point of the interview? Is to answer the question of why me. If you don't want to answer the why me, therefore you didn't care. Now what I do as an interviewer, Ben, is say, I've approached this person, I've sent them an email, or I called them 1, 2, 3 times, no response. Now, they may not care either, but the admissions, all I could do is the admissions officer say, well, the alum applied, they asked for them, they didn't answer, whatever. So it doesn't hurt, but if you're not planning on doing it, I wouldn't say you want it, if you have a choice. Now, sometimes some schools will email and ask you, even if you don't ask for it. Okay? Yes?
As far as
So the short answer to every of those questions is a university by definition is an educational environment. Right? So priority one is always the education part, right? Now, if you are the star basketball player and you are county level or state level, right, in New Jersey, and you want to go to, who's in the finals now? North Carolina for basketball, and you're like top of the world, and they're willing to take you and give you a scholarship, even though your academics are not great, that's fine. But those people are few. Most people are applying to Carolina is not because they're county level basketball, they're that good. They may be good for their level, but not at the state level. So definitely you always look at the academics, the essays, extracurriculars. Right? So I don't think we talked about the extracurriculars. Just one thing to think about with the extracurriculars. Right? So I think also academics mostly here. The extracurriculars are just as important. Why? They answer the same question. Why me? Why take me? Right? Everybody applies, or most people apply with, I did 3 years of soccer. I was playing 4 years of basketball. I did X, right? And that's fine. You need to show that you are multi-faceted in your personality. You're not a technical geek. Okay? Some people are county level basketball, state level basketball. Most people are not. But you need to have something that says, I did something extra. Now, that doesn't mean sports. I may be an amazing violinist, right? And I play at these concerts. That's great. But you need to show something, right? Now, there's a lot of people, again, who apply who say, I'm really good at these 3 things. I may not be exceptionally worldwide, world level, but that's fine. But again, you always want to say what's so unique about them, about you. Go ahead.
And to answer your question, the 3 are very important: GPA, scores, and the extracurriculum. But if you want to prioritize them, colleges look. The GPA is the one they look at. Okay, first, and then your ACT or SAT scores. But the one that attracts your attention is your GPA, because you can get a low GPA and an excellent score. You're a test taker in ACT or SAT, and you don't qualify. So every college has the average acceptance of GPA. You have to score higher than that. So number 1 is the GPA and SAT. The 3 are very important, but if you want to prioritize them, it's the GPA. They look at that the most.
Yeah. Okay. And to follow in essence answer, the GPA also helps you out from financial aid.
Exactly. That's what differentiates you from anyone else.
So later on, when they say, okay, they're good and they want financial aid, they say, because of certain groups or certain categories, they have a certain GPA requirement or expectation, whatever it is, we're going to give it to them, right? Now again, if you're like the football star, the basketball, that's a different category, but those are very few people. How many people will get recruited to North Carolina or Kansas for basketball? 20 people. Like, it's not rounding error. That's like not much, right? So you can't, unless you or one of your children, right, you're at that level. If you're at that level, that's a different conversation. Right? If you're at state level in soccer and you're playing at the state level, right? That's different. You may be recruited. Like, I have people in our town who got recruited for field hockey, for lacrosse, right? And they'll go on full scholarship to schools, and that's fine. That they want to go to school to play that level because they are aspiring for Olympic level, right? That's a different path for people, right? Than I think most people. And genetically speaking, most Egyptians are not, except maybe for a few exceptions, we're not geared that way, right? Maybe maybe unless you're Mo Salah or some other, they're very few, right? They're very few. So I look at sports as a way to exercise, enjoy yourself, teamwork, right? And if you get something out of it else, that's great. Right? We're not built 7'2", and we can play on the field about we aren't for the most part. Overgeneralization, but you get the point. Any other questions? We'll flip it to financials in a second. Yes.
As an interviewer, what things that could stand up for you that makes someone talk from your experience? What to you need to invest in to make them like as an interview.
Yeah.
What always gets your attention in like not every
Mhm.
it's just like general.
So you have to assume. So when I interview, I assume the person is academically qualified. That's my assumption. Like you're not going to be applying to this school unless you don't have the academic requirements of that level of a school. So I'm not going to have a conversation about, right? But I ask like things like, what did you do last summer? I'll ask the question is, what do you think your major is and why? Right? What do you think you want to be in 5 years? What do you think was the most challenging thing you experienced when you're growing up? And these are all different topics. But the key thing I'm trying to do is one very simple thing. And I know I'm an engineer, I get that. But I'm trying to understand their logic. Do they have a logic to the madness? Or are they in this madness of applying and they have no idea what they're doing in their lives? Like, do they have a sensible sense of maturity and comfort that says, I know about this about myself. And I know here's my strengths. And here's what I'm doing about it. Like, is there a sense of purpose? Is what I'm trying to get to. In different answers to the question. Are you emotionally ready for a challenge? Right? The other question I always ask is, give me a hard subject or a hard experience that you've had that you thought you were going to fail from the beginning. And how did you deal with that? Because again, life is hard, college is hard. You may flunk the class. Are you ready? Like, again, these are more than high school, but you've probably experienced it. You've probably taken a class or gone through an experience or something where you thought, like, I'm way over my head. There's no way by the time you hit, like, you're 17, 18, you haven't had an experience like that. Some kids have told me, I've had experience when my parents were getting divorced, and I didn't know what I was going to do. It has nothing to do, it's not an academic question, but that's an experience. I tried to save the marriage. I failed. Right? That's a life experience. That's something that's important. That learning and that attitude is more important than, oh, I love physics. Or I love the question of, well, I thought I was not going to do well in physics, but I studied a little extra and I did better, really well. I'm like, okay. You know, like you're trying to show off without showing off, right? Right? It's like when you go for an interview for a job and they say, what is your weakness? And you say, I'm too, you know, I'm too much of a perfectionist. I try to get everything perfect. Like you're trying to answer the question of what your deficiency is by saying a positive. Those people I usually automatically reject. Because that's not an honest answer. Right? It's the same thing with high schoolers. Give me an honest answer. I don't care. Give me an honest answer of what you're thinking of, right? I'm just sensitive to time. So we're going to go through a couple of things here just on the financial side relatively quickly, right? Financial aid, there's two parts, right? There's need-based and there's merit. Need-based is you don't have enough. Merit-based usually is you're smart enough, you're in a special category, we'll give it to you because of, right? Usually it'll tell you those two things are not related. Kind of a lie, but theoretically yes, but theoretically no. Usually merit-based are smaller. There's a lot of like 1,000, 3,000, like small. The need-based usually are bigger numbers, right? There's also a lot of things are loans, right? Loans are not necessarily a financial aid package. It's just a loan, right? It is not true that there's an income cutoff for aid. You can still get money even though your parents' salary is high. Just that number just drops dramatically. So there's all these things. If I own a house, I can't get any financial aid, right? Parents need to have a job to qualify for aid. That's not true, right? So if parents don't have a job, you can still get financial aid. Right? The amount of aid one receives is the same at any school. No. The college will show one how to get the most amount of money. The colleges do not care. It's your problem. If you don't go and fight for the money and try to find options, the colleges don't really care. They're busy enough. The other big tricky thing here is if you ever, and I'm sure the youth haven't gone through this yet, but if you ever go buy a car or buy a house, there's this big letter, this big thing called, starts with an N, negotiation. Same thing here. You can negotiate college financial aid. You can sit there and say, I'd love to come to your school, but this other school gave me an extra 10 grand. What are you going to do about it? I mean, you don't say it that way, but right? But that's the same tone. Love to come to your school. That's my first choice. I really want to come here. But like my parents are this, we have 3 other kids who are in college, they're offering an extra 10 grand. What can you do anything about it, right? It's a negotiation, right? I had one friend who ended up being a lawyer, which is ironic, who actually had 2 schools literally bidding against each other. And like later on went to become a lawyer, and went into patent law. If you know anything about patent law, it's basically this technology-based negotiation with, like, I was like, dude, like you found your life career when you were like 17, because that was his thing. So all these things, the application process, the financial aid, that's all part of the experience. Higher ed is a business in the United States. They are nonprofit, but they are a business. Hospitals and health systems, right? Not to demean anybody in healthcare, is also a business. They're a nonprofit, right? They are a nonprofit, but it doesn't mean they don't have money. What they care about is their reputation. What they care about is their branding. They care about the quality of their student space. They care about getting funding from other external, right? They're a business in themselves. They have their expenses, their staff. They want to build. Every time I turn around, Penn and CHOP and all these schools, CHOP built this huge research facility in Philly. It's like 15 floors glass, most gorgeous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And they're a nonprofit. How do they get the money? Right? Donations, right? But it's a business. All these universities have a philanthropy, or what's called development department. That's basically just get money into the system, right? So all these guys are also looking at business. Do not assume that schools will put the students' best interests. You have to fend for yourself. They're not going to say, oh, we found you a scholarship. You have to go in there and say, here's what I'm looking for. What can I do? Work with your guidance counselors, etc. Right? So there's something called the EFC, the effective financial contribution. Every school or every level will sit there and say, here's how much we think the family should be able to afford. Right? So it's based on the student's status, right? Whether they're dependent or not dependent, the parents' parental levels. For the dependent student, which is probably most of you, right? The parents, how much the parents will contribute, how much the student will contribute. Therefore, that's the total expected contribution. And there's 2 EFCs based on the federal level and the institutional level. All taxable income is included. All your retirement funds are technically included. Your bank accounts are technically included. Your college fund, if you have one, is included. Your house could be included. The moral of the story is, because you give them a social security number, right? They'll know everything about you and how much you have. Right? So it used to be where, okay, if Nicholas was applying, you'll put all the money for Nicholas's college fund in Mary's thing. So therefore, it has nothing to do with Nicholas. But now they find out that, okay, Mary, give me your social, George, your social. So they figure everything out. 529, which we'll talk about in a sec, right, is a college funding. How much you have in your 529 fund? How much you have in your bank account? How much you have in, right? Because from all that stuff, they can get your income statement. So you have to assume they know everything about you. So don't hide. Right? Some people say, oh, I'll put it in LLC. Right? Some people are really good in business. I'll separate a different company and put all the money there, so therefore I hide it. They'll find out everything. So you're better off telling them upfront. But all these things are included. Untaxed, right? So again, all these things, if you get Social Security, you get Medicaid, Medicare, whatever you get, they have all that information, right? And they'll ask you all that information. And from Social Security, they'll find everything about you anyways, right? So you might as well be upfront to say, here's where the world stands, and here's what I have. Right? Income from other sources, pre-tax, wages from dependent care, right? So if one of the youth is working, how much did they make last year? If I have getting money from alimony or from whatever, etc., right? And then they do an analysis of how much is the student should be paying, how much do the parents pay? And based on that, they'll sit there and say, okay, the student's contribution is X, the parent's contribution is Y, and then we'll do the rest. Now, if you make whatever your favorite big number is, they may say you are ineligible for any financial aid. Right? So our next door neighbor, he got early into Williams, which is a school in Massachusetts. I think it's like $70,000 a year now, or something like that. They gave him a financial aid to work in the cafeteria for like $1,000. Right? And he basically said, is the $1,000 worth the time? Right? If you're paying $70,000, what's an extra $1,000? Like whatever, right? Now, if the number was $20,000, he said, then maybe it's worth the time, right? So you almost have to sit there and say, how much do they think you have? How many other kids do you have in school to apply, right? So if you are number 3 and all of everybody's in college, it's a different answer than you're the first one, right? And then those numbers may change. So here's just, and we're almost done. Here's kind of a graph. Sorry, it's a little small, but hopefully you get the idea. Here's a graph. The blue is public colleges, and the green is private colleges. Okay? The net of the story is every year down the road, both numbers are going up. Both bar charts are going up, right? Nobody's going down, right? Everybody goes up. Now, we can argue why at a different day, a different time. But the blue number is kind of, think of it as your 4 years of college. If you assume the next 3-4 years is kind of the same as the middle thing, that's basically something that's $270,000 is private. Say it's $300,000. Just make it nice even, right? Just even inflation, right? So if you're looking for a private school for 4 years, you're looking at $300,000 worth of expenses. If you're looking for a public school, you're looking at $150,000, $160,000. Roughly. We're talking about immediately you going to college soon, or you're in college. Okay. My kids are on the bottom, the one on the right now. So I got to worry about $500,000 each. Right? So basically, I'm looking at $1 million of college funding that I had to fork out for 2 kids for 4 years. Right? So that's why when you look at these schools, you have to sit there and say the academics and the financial aid together. It's the why me for 2 reasons. Take me, or take me and I need money, and here's what's so special about me that's worth for me to come to your school. Right? In a lot of ways, the application process, not to make it like overly like annoying, is a sales process. I'm trying to sell myself to the school. That's what this is. It's a life lesson because once you finish college, you have to do the same thing when you get a job. Take me because, especially the harder the school, the more competitive the schools are. Right? So some people say, I'd rather go to an easier school because the why me is easier to answer. And I'm easier to get money because I'm that much more special. And that's a different answer. Right? That's a fair answer. I have 10 years. I have to go to college, then I have to go to medical school, then residency. I got a long road. I don't want to fork out $400,000 of undergrad loans and then fork out another $400,000 for medical school and another whatever. By the time I'm done, I have $1 million of debt. I may sit there and say, you know what? I'm going to go to a good school, doesn't have to be great, and get a full ride to save me that $400,000. That's a fair answer. Right? So so what I'm saying is, this is just the reality of the world. How each one of us reacts to that reality is different. Another person may say, I make $2 million a year. What do I care? If you want, $50,000 for your college, go for it. I don't care, right? Another family say, we only make $50,000 a year, the whole year, as a family. I can't afford this. Let's go to a smaller school, get you a full ride, and that's the best that we can do. And that's fine, because you can shine, right? Every person is a little different, right? But the reality is, this is what the world looks like now. Even in public school, right? I think public school Rutgers, if you're in-state, is 35, something like that, 40-ish maybe. Is it less? Rutgers for in-state is how much? Do you know?
I think Rutger Camden, when I applied for my daughter, was like 16. It's better a year.
A year probably.
A year.
So 16, 12. Okay. So, and the other thing to think about is some state schools are cheaper than other state schools, right? So you're a New Jersey resident. You applied to Rutgers. Okay, maybe you're in-state for Rutgers. That's a number. Pennsylvania may have a different number for New Jersey folks. But sometimes the Pennsylvania number is close enough to the Jersey number, a little bit higher, that it may is not that much of a difference. If you look at another state, you may say, if I'm out of state into Pennsylvania or out of state to Virginia, the Virginia numbers are so much better. It's less expensive, right? So you have to also look at it as in-state versus out-of-state. Even the out-of-states are a little different, right? So I know for Florida, for example, right, Mary? Florida, the out-of-state for Florida is actually, quote-unquote, reasonable compared to other out-of-state numbers. So think about that way, even if you're out-of-state. In-state, different answer, right? But again, different options, again, depending on what you want to do. Again, Rutgers, you want to be, if you go to Newark, for example, you and the closest 500 of your Coptic friends, right? Different experience, right? Yes?
Question, I just want to emphasize, these numbers are just tuition only?
Tuition only, not room and board.
Not living and work,
And driving and going home. This is on average. This is an average number. Okay? So I think this is the last slide I think I have, and it'll end. So given these numbers, again, depending on what age group you're in, right? Even if you haven't started, there's something called a 529. Does anybody know about the 529? Okay. 529, okay? 529 is like your retirement fund at work. But it's the reverse. At work, you put money that's pre-tax, and then after that it grows. And then when you take it out, you pay taxes. 529 is post-tax. You put money in, all the money that accrues is not taxed, even when you take it out, as long as it's used for education purposes. And they've loosened up the definition of education. Actually, now for 529, you can allow it to use it for private high schools. Right? As long as it's education related, tuition, room and board, laptops, whatever, you can use it. If you haven't started with a 529 plan, start using it. It's a great use. Unfortunately, in the state of New Jersey, I think it's Vanguard in Jersey, right? Vanguard has a 529 program. Some states allow you to use the money that you spend in the 529 as a deduction in your state income tax. So I came from New York. New York had a 529 that any money that you spent in your 529 for New York as a New York resident, you're allowed to use it as a deduction in your income tax. New Jersey does not. New Jersey has never done it. So when I moved down here, I was kind of now annoyed, right? Because now I'm a Jersey resident, but I can't. But anyways, 529. That's comment one. Put it into 529, even if you have never started. It doesn't hurt. And the thing with 529 is, if you use it for one child, if you have money for one child, and they're so smart, they got the full scholarship, you can transfer it from one child to another child. And if they're so smart, they say, no, daddy, mommy, you saved up 10,000 for me, 5,000, whatever it is. I got a full ride for undergraduate, but I'm going to use it for grad school. You can use it for grad school. So as long as it's undergrad or graduate, and it can be transferred from one child to another child. So start using it now. I think Vanguard is New Jersey. I can't remember. I started Vanguard, that was in New York, but as a Jersey resident, I can still fund New York's 529. So you don't have to be obligated, one second, Rick. You don't have to be obligated to be using your own states. When I was in New York, it was a benefit to use New York's 529 because I got a tax deduction of my plan. As a Jersey person, I'm still funding the New York 529. I can still use it on whatever school I want to. I'm just not getting the New Jersey benefit from a state perspective, but whatever. Too late. The transfer from one state to another state in the 529, it hits that's a tax liability. So it's not worth it. If you started one state, you stick with one state. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
No, not at all. I was going to say there really is no downside to funding a 529 because even if all your children, let's say by the grace of God, have full rides, the 529 plan can even go to their children or their children's children. The 529 will never expire and you'll never pay a penalty as long as it's used for education, even from one generation to another generation.
Yep.
So you can bequeath it to your grandchildren. So there's no downside. Honestly, the earlier you start, the better. If you have a child who's a year old, start to put any amount of money in a 529 plan. Even $50 a month, $100 a month. The earlier you start, the better off you will be long term.
Yep. And again, if you're already saving for money for college, put it in a 529, so it's official. So even if you're putting it, you have a separate bank account or a separate account, right, in TD Bank, and this is the college fund for the kid, put it in a 529. So therefore, all the interest that you're getting over the years is not taxable by definition. So it's a special category, right? And again, you can transfer. I didn't know about from one generation to the other generation, but who knows, we're going to be around for 2 more generations after this. But, does that make sense? So I think that's the last slide I had. But again, really key. Even if you don't have a dime at all in the college planning, start. It doesn't hurt. Like there's no loss to it at all. You gain so much, and essentially it's free money because you're accruing it anyways, right? Every state has it differently. Some states you can use it as part of stocks, right? You can use mutual funds, whatever it is. You can make up whatever you want. So, does that help? Any questions on the financial aid side? I mean, I'm not. This is a whole topic to itself. But at least, if nothing else you got out of the financial aid stuff it's important, it's critical. I need to sell myself. Do a 529.
Can you please expenses for colleges in your debt center?
No. Otherwise, you can claim nothing. You can claim it. Yes. Sorry.
Do you have a limit as to how much you can contribute to that
529.
525?
I'm trying to remember if New Jersey. I don't think New Jersey has a limit. No limit. Yeah, no limit. So for. Go ahead.
Again, please keep in mind, you can only use it for education. So don't use this as a retirement fund or don't, but so you always have to keep in mind that it can only be used for education and the penalty for withdrawing for anything other than education is so high that you would not want to do that.
So,
But
so,
yes, there is no limit.
so there's no. So from every year you can put $2 to $3 million. Not a problem. But again, there is no limit. Like I said, some states, like I said, when I was in New York, your contributions up to $15,000 per child was tax deductible. Anything more than $15,000 was not deductible at that point. But again, that was a New York thing that doesn't apply to you guys in Jersey. So therefore, there's a benefit. At some point, the benefit is not worth it. But and again, every year you can do that for every child, and you can transfer. So when I got my first child, I had a 529 for her, and we created a second one with my name. And when my second child was born, I transferred whatever's on my account to the second child. Right. So maybe for planning, maybe family planning, family planning process. So you can do that as well. Yes.
How big is the full ride? I don't see some children like with good grades to get full ride. It's because it's easier to do private schools and then they can give you big things than getting full ride from average school, in school, or to school.
I think, and maybe I'll give the folks who you want to answer it.
Well, do you mean that you don't know of people that took full rides to school?
Yeah, what did they?
Okay, so we personally know a lot of kids from our church that went to Rutgers, East Brooklyn, and they are on full rides. And because their GPA is very high, they're least, maybe 4 or 5 kids that have full rights. They don't pay anything but the,
Room and board.
room and board, yeah. But it is there, as long as the GPA, and the GPA, by the way, if your son is a freshman and maybe messed up in a couple of subjects or something, sophomore colleges like to see the upline, okay? So it's not that he got a couple of B's in freshman, so, his GPA is 1, no. They like to see that from a B, he went to an A in sophomore, kept the A in junior year, and so on. So they would like to see that incline, okay? So it's never too late for GPA. I know it starts from freshman year, but they always like to see that incline. And yes, GPA, SATs, and extracurricular will get you full rights in Rutgers, Camden, Brunswick, I know Penn State, a lot of them. So,
We have special application.
no, it's just, if those 3 are perfect, they will get them full rights.
So
And some of them are in honor schools in Rutgers, and they have full rights in honor schools.
So question for you, Ines. Is it, so even within the Rutgers system, right? So there's Newark, Brunswick, and Camden, are the 3, right?
Yes,
Is Camden easier to get a full ride in than Brunswick? Or
I
no?
think it's the other way around. It's Brunswick
Easy.
because they have, it's
Bigger
a
facility.
school.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just, it runs the chapter to get into the camp. I don't know.
Yeah,
Brunswick
it's
is
actually,
harder.
the branch campuses are easier
Yes,
to get into.
Yeah.
So the main campus, as most universities, the main campus is a little more selective, because on the main campus has more offerings, more disciplines,
Yep.
more courses. So it tends to be more difficult on the main campus than the branch campuses.
and it's
Yeah.
more harder to get into the honors class than the regular classes.
Yeah.
The honors
But-
The
college.
honors
Yes,
college,
honors college.
Yeah, but the honors college is only in Brunswick.
Yes,
that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So-
It's only at the main
Yeah.
campus, because also they have their own dormitory.
yes,
The honors college
Yeah.
exactly.
has their own dormitory.
So maybe to answer your question a little differently, again, even if you're looking at Rutgers, right, you can still apply to different Rutgers because the reaction of Brunswick Rutgers may be different than Camden Rutgers, and Camden may be willing to give you more than a Brunswick Rutgers, right? So the same thing with even all this. So remember how we talk about different categories, right? We talk about reaches and ones that you feel comfortable with and one that are safety. You may be able to get into a middle or a safety with a much higher financial aid, right? Because you're then again you're trying to sell yourself, right? When you go to somewhere where you're special and you're really good compared to most of the people there, say we want this person to come. We have to incentivize the youth, right, to come via maybe extra financial aid, right? Where if you apply to school where you kind of look like everybody else, it may be harder, right? You have to differentiate sometimes yourself maybe with ethnic or sports or something else, right? So that's why it's important to apply to different types of schools and different academic levels because the reaction may be very different.
There's another state school other than Rutgers, and that's the New Jersey State School. It's optional. So you can apply to Rutgers, the 3 locations that's getting set, and the New Jersey State School. Yeah.
I have a question. Is Rutgers still, has its own application? Like you can't use the automatic
Common App.
Common App? Is it still that way? I remember when Jeremy applied, Rutgers did not do the Common App. They had to, if they have their own thing and it had to be.
Well, it's a state school, so it accepts rolling applications. So it doesn't have a deadline. Of course, we always say the earlier the better, but it doesn't have a deadline. So all through the year, it takes the applications. That's rolling application.
No, but it's its
own
own
application. It's not.
It has it's
That's
separate.
it, right? So they did a bit of a pain, but
Yeah.
doesn't use the Common App.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, GPA is categorized into 3. So on level classes, the maximum is 4. Honors classes, you can go up to 4.5. APs goes up to 5. So it depends on what your kid is taking. So, well, they'll count it that way. It's very hard to calculate it, but a good GPA would be for APs would be 4.6, 4.7. That's eye-opening. Yeah. Because not many people know that it's beyond 4. Yeah.
Yeah, in general, it's usually, it's weighted versus non-weighted.
Exactly.
Okay, so, school looks at what you can achieve as an AP or honor student a little bit different. And certainly when the question was earlier about full rides, to get a full ride at a competitive school is not going to be based upon GPA, SAT, extracurriculars. It's going to be those top issues that Amy was talking about there. Because they have a dime a dozen of kids who have gotten 1550s on their SATs. They have straight A's. They have extracurriculars. The only thing that's going to make a difference for a full ride at a University of Pennsylvania or MIT or Harvard or whatever is something totally out of the ordinary. You know, you're a concert violinist who was played at the Met. You know, that sort of profound difference.
And again, it could be financial aid, right? So, I mean, I know in Morristown, at least according to my neighbor, one of the seniors graduating this year got a full ride at the Princeton. But his parents, you know, are under 50,000 salary, right? They're simple people, non-white, whatever. He grew up a certain way. He did very well academically, but he's kind of a special person that's not very common, right? And so he was able to get into Princeton because of academics, but also his parents financially weren't there. And his experiences when he was growing up and a lot of inner city types of experience, like his essay supposedly was about how growing up and having drug dealers and being almost killed twice, right? That's again, remember how I said you're selling yourself? I'm not saying that's something we want to aspire to, being almost getting killed, but my point is, like, that story resonated.
I believe Princeton is that way for almost all applicants, just they have such a huge high endowment that
Yeah.
you just need to get in, but once you're in, everything is pretty much taken care of. That's what I had heard one time when I went on a tour.
Yeah.
They said everybody here is covered. It's just a matter of getting in.
As far as the financial,
It's-
they're very young.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's a need.
Yeah, it's a need, but yeah. So
Back to Ray's point, that even if you get a very good GPA, very high scores, extracurriculum, back to what Danny was saying, essay is very important. So that you need to pop out in the essay. You need to attract their attention because it could be that they make the decision on the essay. Because as Ray said, hundreds of thousands other kids get great GPAs, SATs, everything. But this will make the cutoff for your kid, the essays. And that's why the earlier the better. We don't wait until senior year to write our essays. We do it maybe sophomore year. We start mingling with it and then add on until we reach senior year. And timing is very important.
and again, it's academic reasons and financial reasons. So there's two things. We always focus on the academics, and then we don't realize that there's other parts of it. Again, this whole thing again is you're trying to sell yourself.
Junior that finished SAT or ACT?
So in the college application, officially you're applying in the fall. But however, you should be looking at the essays that happened this year, and look at the essays and start almost, because again, the essays don't really change dramatically. You can start looking at the essays now, because again, there's always a generic essay. Tell us about yourself. There's always a generic one, right?
I want to come to our problem.
Yeah.
It's always very generic,
Is-
so you can start it early.
Yeah. So
One thing I advise is please do not depend on your advisor or counselor on the high school. They don't care about your kids, okay? They make fatal mistakes, okay? So you care more, the students are the advisors. So you guys, you have everything in front of you, the internet, everything. Just Google everything, get to your advisor and tell them we need this, we want this. Don't wait for them to tell you what to do, because guess what? You're not their kid, they don't care. They take their salary with or without you getting your benefits. Okay, and fight for what you want. I know my older son, Anthony, he wanted like 3 sciences. He's not a language guy, okay? And the rules say, oh, you have to get languages for the 4 years of high school. Guess what? It wasn't that situation. When we read about it,
mean, unless you go to a private school, then they'll care. But most public school systems,
They don't.
they don't care,
Yeah,
right?
I tell you, guidance counselors in all schools are really not as good as they're supposed to.
And this goes to college, by the way. Guidance counselors in college still don't care about me. We have friends of our kids that didn't graduate on time because in college, and the parents had to pay an extra semester because the guidance counselor messed up. You can't do anything about it. You can't sue them. You can't do anything. It is what it is.
Yeah, and remember, I said, college and university are a business, right? If you want to take your time over 4 years and make it 6 years, that's great. That's fine, right? They're not going to run after you, whether at the high school level or the college level. So the burden is on us to figure things out. So I know we went over, so hopefully this was helpful, at least on the academic side and the financial side. But again, I know in every family is different, and every situation is different, every dynamics is different. What applies to some on 529 or doesn't apply. What's reasonable financially, what's reasonable academically, you have to answer that for yourselves. But
Henny, I know it's overwhelming for parents to read all this. Can we put it on the church website? Maybe?
yep, I can. We can put that. We can put that up. Yeah, that's fine. We can put it up.
These rules, like, when you run soon enough for us, this, this will probably.
So we'll do probably. We'll try. I'm not sure it's going to be next month or going to be due. My guess is it'll be closer to September. But again, I think in the career one, you have to think of it as categories. Because if you don't know whether you're a sciencey, mathy person or an Englishy person, the career thing is not going to help you. But if you're a sciencey, mathy person and say, well, is it medicine or is it dentistry or is it pharmacy? Like, that's one question. But if I could go to law school or medical school. Like, if you can't answer that question, then the career thing is not going to help you, honestly. Make sense? Okay? I'll be here for a couple of minutes if you want, but again, we're around, so